all Israeli leaders for the last 30 years. I know them personally. As for Syria, no, Israel is not involved in the Syrian conflict, no. And thank God for that. Israel's sphere of interest is security of Dutch heights. When Druzes living on Dutch heights were fighting against Islamists, they tried to protect themselves from Al-Qaeda. And so Druzes, the militaries, the former Israeli militaries, they crossed the border and they helped their relatives. This is a fact. This is reality. And Israeli government didn't protect them from this. Second thing, Israel is absolutely not interested in the fact that Iran, which de facto has a war, not announced, but this is a war, to create on the territory of Syria the second Hezbollah, which would be as dangerous for Israel as Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the platform for bombarding Israel from southern Lebanon should not be created in Syria. And Russia helps in that. We committed ourselves for some 50 to 70 kilometers from Israeli and Syria border. Not theoretical, which counts Dutch hates Syrians. No. In this case, I understand that our Ministry of Foreign Affairs believes Dutch hates belonging to Syria. But me, as Trump, we don't think so. I was there in that region, and the part of those hates which is occupied by Israeli, where Israeli population is Israel, and I don't want to discuss it at all. And they know my point of view in MFA, in the Ministry of Defense. They know my point of view also, and there were no words said, and they don't argue with me. So from the factual border, from the factual boundary, where Assad army and border militaries met each other, 50-70 kilometers should be the zone with no Iranian troops, no troops from Iran at all. And Russia is providing that. Second thing, when in Syria, for example, Damascus airport or Lebanon accepts some goods from Iran, missiles, some military equipment, so dangerous equipment which can help in a future Iran-Israeli war. Israeli planes destroy caravans with those goods, and sometimes they destroy those planes which bring over it to the airports. Despite any Russia-Iranian relations, Russia does nothing to prevent Israel from doing this. And that's it, very simple. Moreover, when Russian planes making flights over Syria accidentally fly over Israeli territory, there's everything very tight, so it can happen. So no one tries to shoot them down, as it was in Turkey, when our plane was taken down accidentally when it flew over the Turkish border. And yeah, that was very hard incident. As far as I remember, it could have led to a big war, but Erdogan and Putin abstained from that. And there's no such problems with Israel. That's it. There are relations in the security area, in the area of military departments. Minister Shoigu can speak with the Minister of Defense and with the government of Israel, also Patrushev, and Russia is absolutely not interested in making Israel disappear from the map of the Middle East. But not theoretically, but practically. We try not to use Israel in any Russian projects or goals, and the Israeli government appreciates that. As for Ukraine, okay, Israel takes a neutral side here, neutral stance, more to the benefit of Ukraine. The mercenary and volunteers go there to fight against our militaries, and they also deliver some non-lethal weapons, as we call them. Israeli press, which is under complete control of Ukrainian or refugees, Russian oligarchs, has a very hard anti-Russian policy, but since the regime in Ukraine, despite it is headed by ethnical Jews, it's absolutely Nazi regime, and the Holocaust in Ukraine was the hardest one, and it was implemented by those people who were heroes now for this current regime. The Russian government does not forget to remind this also to the Israeli government. And then let's see what happens in the future. But this is the real picture.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's an extraordinarily complicated relationship, and we need this kind of insight to help us decipher it. One last topic before we go, and it's one that's on the headlines today, and that's Sudan. You mentioned earlier about the role played by the United States in getting Sudan to be split into Sudan and Southern Sudan. Today, what's left in Sudan, we see some very difficult internal conflicts between the Sudanese military and rapid response forces. Here in the United States, there's a lot of talk about the hidden hand of Russia, that Russia is involved, especially in terms of using Wagner to promote this conflict, to side with the rapid response forces because of greed, some secret relationships with gold smuggling, etc. Can you give us some insight into what Russia's relationship with Sudan is, and does Russia, in fact, have a hidden hand in this conflict?
Look, I'm not a big supporter of the conspiracy theory. It's everything very simple here. When I speak about the role of the states in this split for Sudan and Southern Sudan, I mean those nice ladies who call Afro-American lobby of the State Department, starting from Condi Rice, Susan Wright, and I remember very well their role in the fact that the Southern Sudan, African Sudan, should be split from the Northern Arab Sudan. That was very interesting idea, but they boiled down to Dinko started to kill each other, that the genocide topic appeared for the Southern Sudan at all, and Salva Kiir, its leader, who could be a member of BLM movement, was got under sanctions, because not always when you help people with the politically correct color of their skin, if you help them with their own state, they, instead of building democracy, they would start killing their neighbors of the same color of the skin but from another tribe. This should be taken into account. And this was the first precedent, the first case in the post-colonial era of dividing a state in the Middle and Near East, recognized by the Organization of United Nations. And this experiment was absolutely a failure. It doesn't mean that in that Sudan which stayed, started to live better. Genocide stopped in Kordofan, in Darfur, in other local places. But no, it didn't happen. That was just a different word. It is built based on a Middle Age principle, tribal principle. To discuss here human rights is absolutely useless. To speak about democracy is absolutely silly, because every time I was really sad and disappointed when I hear about this. For now, Russia doesn't have any hidden hand in this conflict. This is a conflict between General Abdel Fattah, the head of Sudan and head of Sudani militaries, and his deputy, Mr. Mohad Hamdan Daglo, Hamidi, the head of the Rapid Deployment Forces. Just imagine two gangs, one gang and the other gang. Gang number one controls oil. Gang number two controls gold mines. They overthrew the previous government, and after the Omar al-Bashir deposed, who was one of the dictators in Sudan of Arab world, the temporary government came to power, and Al-Burhan and Hemeti, they both toppled it. And then they should split the bounty, right? But both of them have own military group. And the conflicts start here between Egypt, which supports Al-Burhan, and Emirates, which support Hemeti. And yes, Hemeti has contacts both with Chad and with the Russian Wagner group and with Libya. He just received from Khalif Haftar significant munition reserves. And what do you want in this situation? And the leader of each gang has own supporters and patrons. And the question of control over Red Sea ports in Sudan. Port Abu Ammama, the Emirates invest around $6 billion, and this is a very decent sum of money. And despite the situation, for example, in Libya, Egypt, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Russian Wagner Group are supporting Khalif Haftar altogether. And in the situation in Sudan, the interests of Emirates and Egypt are different. And in Yemen, Hemeti's people are used by the United Arab Emirates as field militia locally. They have old military relations. This is a big bunch of different problems. The big problem is that in the south of Sudan, the war used to be all the time, but Khartoum, which is being attacked now by Al-Burhan's troops, was never under military strikes, and there's a huge amount of civilians sitting homes without electricity, food and water. And that was just the first case when they faced real war. This situation with refugees, for more than 20,000 people flew over Chad border, and most probably this conflict will impact Chad and probably Libya. Look, what Americans will do there, we should ask our good old friend Bill Burns. He is the director of the Central Intelligence Office, and I used to be in good relations with him when he used to work as the American ambassador in the Russian Federation. And at that time, it seemed that our countries can act as partners and probably as friends. Now, it's not like that, we understand, but okay, what can we do? I was probably mistaken. Well, the American interests in Sudan can be described more by the CIA director, if he would be willing to. As for the Russian interests, in terms of the state, they are not pronounced. We try not to get involved as a state in all those quarrels and fights where we shouldn't. be involving. As for the Wagner Group and Wagner troops, this is a separate private military enterprise. They have, once again, relations with one of the conflict party, but they are not involved in this war. This is an internal Sudani war, and the separate topic is why Hemeti groups should have been integrated in the Sudan army for 2 years, and Al-Burhan believed that for 2 years he will be able to take it under control. Hemeti demanded 10 years, but when you have 10 years of absolute lack of control, it's much better than only 2 years, okay? But as a result, they didn't come to an agreement and started to fight. But this is Africa. That's how we see it.
Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for this wonderful tour de force of the Middle East and providing insight into Russia. I appreciate your time. And I think everybody who watched today got a treat. That was Professor Yevgeny Satanovsky, Director of the Middle East Institute, and an Orientalist who I think this was extremely valuable for anybody who was able to watch. And I thank everybody. I think, once again, this show has lived up to something I believe in very strongly, and that is to empower yourself with knowledge and information. Knowledge is power, and you have empowered yourself by tuning in today. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.